So let's get started. What I'd like to do first of all is just to welcome William Gaunt, our speaker. William and I have known each other for 35 years since I moved back down to Yorkshire in 1990, a long, long time. Some of you will not even have been born when William and I knew each other. I remember when I worked at Parkland, or when I worked later on in the millennium, people would send me their applications for a job and they had their date of birth as 1995, and I think, oh, they've made a mistake. They can't even get their date of birth right. And you just forget that it's us that are getting older and the world is moving on. So we've known each other for a long, long time. And one of the things that I respect with William is his dedication to textiles and to the Yorkshire textile movement, not just to Bradford Textile Society or to Sunnybank Mills, but in general to education, to craft, to everything associated with textiles. I know John Gaunt is a friend, and Susan Gaunt, your cousin William, is a friend of mine. The link between William, Sunnybank Mills, started a while ago. Haldy, when we had the Phoenix Project presentation at Sunnybank Mill, Haldy met one of the young people that came to that presentation, William. I don't even know if you know this, but Haldy then gave them a job. And yesterday, when I was at the British Wool marketing offices, there was the girl who had been to the Phoenix Project at Sunnybank Mills working for British Wool. Sean Knott, who may be on the call, I invited Sean to attend. Sean Knott is one of our friends and associates, is a photographer. And Sean used to have his studio at Sunnybank Mills. And can you believe that the Cloth of Kings brand that I have, Sean did the photographer for the products at Sunnybank Mills. And another link is that Sean is now in touch with Dino, who has the classic car company, who's a member, and they're working on a project to take some pictures of classic cars. So what we're doing within the Bradford Textile Society is expanding the crafts, expanding the skills, and using a network to get different people involved with each other. I attended the Threads exhibition at Sunnybank Mills, which was fantastic. William, I can't remember how many exhibitors there was. Was it about 50, 60?
Yeah, 50 to 60. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was fantastic. All these people with wool, with crafts, artists. And William kindly gave us a stand for the Bradford Textile Society, and we managed to recruit 8 new members on the day. And I, in fact, may come back and take a stand myself at your next exhibition, William, in reciprocation for that. So the Threads exhibition that you run was very, very good. The other thing that impressed me with your approach, William, was when we approached you for this subscriptions to the Bradford Textile Society, you realised that you were a bit in arrears and you paid the retrospective amount that you were due. Not many people would have done that. So respect, William. And you also support the Society of Dyers and Colourists. I know Andrew Filarowski is often over at Sunnybank Mills. So in general, your work at Sunnybank Mills is not just textile orientated, but it's almost coordinating and collaborating with all the units, including the Bradford Textile Society. You go all the way back to 1829. And one of the things that I'm very much involved in at the moment is bicentennials. I would love to be at your bicentennial in 2029, William, which is only 5 years away. The Harris Tweed bicentennial is in 2045. I'm hoping to be at that too. I'll be about 90 years old. Unfortunately, I'm very unlikely to be at the Bradford Textile Society bicentennial because it's 2093. But the 2-year-olds and the 3-year-olds today will be 72-year-old when the Bradford Textile Society has its bicentennial. Without any further ado, I'd like to pass you over to William to start his presentation. You'll be amazed, as I was. I never knew that Edwin Woodhouse and Sunnybank Mills had association with James Ives and all the other things that had influenced your business, William, like the Gulf War, etc., etc. So I personally am looking forward very much to this lecture, as I'm sure everyone else is. And over to you, William.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Malcolm. Very generous introduction. And thanks to everyone who's attending tonight. And also, if you're going to be watching it on catch up, hi to you. Now, my first job is to share the screen, which is, let's just see if we can do that. Right. So I've named this presentation "A Fight for Survival," and we'll be having a quick run through the history of Sunnybank Mills as a textile mill, and then it's also, I think, very interesting to talk about its future and the sort of activities that we get up to today. Um, our family's been connected with Sunnybank Mills since its inception, but I hasten to add we haven't always owned it. In fact, for most of the time of the mills, we weren't owning it, but we have been connected with it. And as Malcolm said, it was founded in 1829. And I'm just trying to find sorry, to move the slides forward. Technical glitch. Ah, there we go. Um, so I run the mills currently with my cousin John Gaunt, who I'm sure many of you will know. And here we are standing up on the rooftops of the weaving sheds, which have sadly no longer there now. So I'm just trying to work out how to change the slides. Oh, here we go. Sunnybank Mills is situated in Farsley between Leeds and Bradford, and here's an aerial shot of the mills. As you can see, it's quite a substantial set of buildings and quite a congested site. So if I just do the pointer, the mills complex, I'm just going around the edge of it, includes half of this woodland at the back here. And so that's the whole site here. And it's equidistant from the centre of Leeds to the centre of Bradford, about 4 miles from each. It was founded in 1829 as a club mill, which is quite crucial. So it was almost like a cooperative. And there were 31 weavers in the village who clubbed their money together and bought a plot of land, which was about 3 acres. And here on the initial deeds, you can see the fields marked here. They then raised a bit more money and were able to build the first set of mill buildings and started in 1829. And my great-great-great-grandfather, John Gaunt, was amongst one of the weavers in the village. John Gaunt was a master weaver, and he used to work for the Hainsworths as an overlooker. He made the very smart move of marrying the mill owner's daughter, and he married one of the Hainsworths, and then got involved with Sunnybank Mills at its inception in 1829. The club weavers ran the mill for about 50 years, so 2 generations of the initial weavers, and they were all weaving on their own account. So we have very few records from that period of time, but they would typically, it was a scribbling and fulling mill. So there were only 2 processes carried out at the mill initially. So each weaver would buy their own sacks of wool and they'd bring them down, they'd scour them and then bring the wool down for scribbling, which is carding and producing slubbings. They would then take the slubbings back up to their house and they would hand spin them at their houses. Our house was at the top of the village. In fact, the family called it a factory. It was a 3-story house, and there was a spinning jenny in there, which Reuben Gaunt apparently was very adept at using, and about 6 hand looms, and the lead house out at the back, which is a dye house. So they would produce the slubbings at the mill, weave, spin and weave at home, and then they'd bring the cloth back down to the mill for the second process, which is fulling. So they had some fulling stocks on the ground floor of the mill. In the 1850s, we can see a weaving shed being built adjacent to the mill buildings. And so that suggests that the handloom weaving was expanding, and they were able to bring more looms down to the mills. So the Gaunt family with the 5 or 6 looms up at the house, they were always employing handloom weavers as well as just the family weaving the cloth. So the club mill carried on for about 2 generations, each weaver weaving on their own account. There were companies formed amongst the weavers. Ross Roberts was the biggest company. Both the Ross family and the Roberts family were famous textile families in Farsley. Um, and they would take their cloth down to the centre of Leeds to the cloth hall. Farsley was a coloured cloth village, so they would go down to the coloured cloth hall and they would sell their pieces at the cloth markets twice a week. And they would come back to Farsley and weave the next batch of cloth. The cloth that was sold at the cloth hall was then dressed by the Georgian cloth merchants, people like Benjamin Gott. So they would then finish the cloth, crop it and steam it. And if it was white cloth, which we didn't produce, they would also dye it. And then they had access to the markets and they would sell the final cloth both home and abroad. We can see in the 1880s, a chap called Edwin Woodhouse starts renting a lot of the mill space off the club mill. And he was also renting space down on the canal at Airedale Mills. And in 1882, the club mill trustees decided to sell the mill in its entirety to Edwin Woodhouse. And here's his letterhead from around that time. You can see there's 2 mills there. That the scale of the copper plate is a bit deceptive. So he bought Bellevue Mills a couple of years before he bought Sunnybank Mills. This is a small mill about 400 yards up the hill, and it could house about 15 or so looms. So it's a bit deceptive, the picture there. It was a lot smaller than that. And he obviously ran out of space up at Bellevue and expanded down to Sunnybank, down the bottom of the hill. Now, Edwin Woodhouse, he wasn't one of the club weavers from Farsley. He was from Halifax, and he brought the worsted manufacturing to Sunnybank Mills. So the first thing that he did when he arrived was he doubled the size of the mill and built a worsted spinning mill. He was a typical Victorian entrepreneur, and here he is in his manorial chains. So he was obviously very interested in his textile manufacturing, and that's what made him wealthy, but he was also very engaged in the civic life of the city. So he was mayor of Leeds in the 1880s, very soon after he bought Sunnybank Mills, and later Lord Mayor of Leeds in 1905. And here's a picture of the weaving shed in 1905 with it all trimmed up, and the weavers standing next to their looms to welcome Edwin Woodhouse back into the mill as Lord Mayor. And it's interesting, you can see there that most of the weavers, even by 1905, were already female weavers. So Edwin Woodhouse, he was also interested, like I said, in the civic life of the city. He was a very key part of founding Yorkshire College, which is now the University of Leeds, Leeds General Infirmary. He was a musician and got involved with fundraising for the Leeds School of Music, now the Leeds Conservatoire. And he was also you see there, DL against his name. He was the chairman of the licensing bench for about 30 years. So controlled all the pubs and whatnot in the city. He did run for Parliament as a Liberal MP, but he failed to get elected. But he was a Liberal councillor for most of his life in Leeds. In 1913, Edwin Woodhouse by this time was aged 80. He had three daughters, which for a Victorian gentleman wanting to hand their business over presented a problem. None of the sons-in-law were interested in taking the business on. One was a vicar, Reverend Kemble. They were based up in Cumbria, so one daughter moved up to Cumbria with him. The other daughter married a medical officer, and so they went out to the Far East. And the middle daughter married another colonial, a mining engineer. So in 1913, Edwin Woodhouse decides to sell the mill. By this time, he has made Sunnybank Mills into one of the premier worsted mills in the country. We were very much a Huddersfield style mill, weaving very fine worsteds, sort of stuck in Leeds. And that was something that came to haunt us in our later days. But he built up this fantastic reputation, and he sold the business in 1913 to the Ives family. Now, the Ives family had a well-established woolen business at Nunroyd Mills over in Guiseley with a very good reputation. But they only held on to Sunnybank for 3 years. In fact, when I looked at the history of the Ives family mill, which the family wrote their own history, there's no mention of them owning Sunnybank Mills at all. And so I sort of infer from that it wasn't one of their most successful ventures. Perhaps because they were woolen specialists, they didn't really gel with the fine worsteds that were being woven at Sunnybank Mills.
I think, William, that's an important point to make to some of the students that are
Mm,
listening to you tonight, is that the difference between the worsted mill and the woolen mill are completely different. Different
yes.
processes, different raw materials, different customers. And when I introduced you, I mentioned James Ives. And when I moved down to Guiseley in 1978 to work for West Riding Fabrics, Ives were making acrylic fabrics. So I'd gone from woolen, I'd gone from worsted. Their key product was acrylic dressing gowns for the mail order business. So it just
Uh-huh.
shows you how mills can change over time, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to adapt to survive. That's always true. Yeah, yeah, and the skills for the worsted trade were yeah, quite different from those of the woolen. It's a much harder cloth to weave. You've got finer yarns, a lot more ends, and the mending of the cloth is a lot more intricate. So in the middle of the Second World War, the Ives family sold Sunnybank Mills to their biggest wool supplier, a chap called Billy Gaunt. Now, Billy Gaunt is my great-grandfather. And so in the middle of the Second World War, Billy buys the mill that his grandfather helped found as one of the club weavers himself. So the Gaunt family, I'll just rewind a little bit. So we have John Gaunt, who was one of the founding members of the Farsley Club Mill. We then also had Joseph Gaunt and his two elder brothers, Isaac and Reuben. Reuben and Isaac went off to found their own mills in Farsley and were very successful. Joseph had a combing plant in Bradford, and his middle son, Billy, didn't join the combing plant. His two elder brothers had gone in there, and he set out on his own after school, and he went down to the Bradford Wool Exchange. His father gave him £200 to start out in business, and he was very, very successful and soon got beyond buying and selling wool at the Wool Exchange and got into the mills business, combing plants. He bought Sunnybank Mills. Along comes the Second World War, which was after a bit of a hiatus, a real boom time for the textile industry. I think every soldier needs 30 yards of cloth. So there's an awful lot of cloth being woven for the war effort. And Billy was very active in the First World War. And he built up a textile empire. I think the next slide might show some of his mills that he owned. Here's his letterhead with what have we got there? We've got 8 mills around the letterhead. And you know he had more mills than this. So we've got mills up in Bradford, hosiery mill in Coventry there, and he also had mills, a carpet mill in Canada, spinning mill in Belgium, and he also had early wool processing mill in Melbourne down in Australia. So he had a vast empire, and at the same time he had his wool merchanting business. At that time, there were 3 very important wool merchants. There was James Hill, Jacob Behrens, and Billy Gaunt, and between the 3 of them, they controlled the market. And they actually bought on a vast scale and were able to smooth out the peaks and troughs of the wool prices, which was quite an important part of how the Bradford wool trade worked. He was not only interested in mills, he had 5 theatres down in the West End of London, the Adelphi opposite the Savoy being one of them, pictured here. And he also introduced the Packard car, which was a luxury car from Detroit to the UK. This is his showroom here on the corner of Piccadilly. And he also had a coach works up at Hendon Aerodrome in North London, where he built up the bodywork of the cars to the customer's particulars. He was interested in marine insurance. He had lost no, I think he won an insurance claim on some wet wool coming from South America, and saw an opportunity to make some more money with the insurance. And in his spare time, he had 3 farms up here in Yorkshire. So he was a very, very busy man. And he was intensely wealthy at the time. His Adelphi Theatre opposite the Savoy, he was able to afford a permanent suite at the Savoy Hotel, because there was also a lot of wool being bought and sold at the docks down in London. However, after the First World War and all the success of that time, the crash of 29 caught Billy Gaunt out very badly. He was very extended with borrowings throughout his business career, and the recession in the mid-20s hit his mills hard. He managed to sell all his theatres off, but his mills were hemorrhaging money, and the banks and the Inland Revenue were foreclosing on their credit. One of his suppliers took him to court in 1928 for bankruptcy, and the judge of the court said, I'm not going to allow this bankruptcy case to follow through, because if Billy Gaunt goes bankrupt, all his connections with the textile trade would mean the whole trade would be massively hit. So the judge told the creditors, which were 4 large banks and the Inland Revenue, to make a deal with Billy Gaunt. And in 1929, a heads of agreement was reached whereby Billy retained ownership of his mills, but no control. And the banks and Inland Revenue would appoint their own boards to the mills, and half the profits of the mill would go back to the mill, so they could reinvest in machinery, but half would be used to pay off the debt. And there's a poignant minute note in December 1929 where Billy Gaunt enters the room as chairman, and halfway through the meeting resigns and leaves the room. And at that point, the banks took over control of Billy's textile empire. in the early 1930s, after there was a lot of labor disputes around this time, it was very tough trading. But soon the profits of the mill started flowing again, and Billy Gaunt's debts were gradually paid down. And here's a picture of the mending department celebrating the coronation of George VI. Billy passed away in the middle of the Second World War, and still the banks had control of all of his business empire. My grandfather here, Alfred Gaunt, he was serving with the Royal Artillery out in India at the time, and he managed to negotiate. It took him 6 months, compassionate leave to come back to the UK and sort out his father's affairs. And Alfred was able to make a deal with the banks, which his proud father never could face up to, whereby the family got back one of the mills in its entirety, Sunnybank Mills, and the rest of the mills were sold off to the West Yorkshire, West Riding Woolen and Worsted Group, which Malcolm may well have worked for in a later inception by the sounds of it.
That's right. They were owned by Coates Paton's, the Scottish company.
That's exactly it.
And I worked for John and Willie Shelton, and I never even knew that happened, William.
Yeah.
That's the joy of listening to your presentation. There's a lot of things that I'm hearing that I wasn't aware of. So I effectively worked for one of the companies that had been involved with your family. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I worked with West Riding Fabrics from 78 to 83. So 5 years I was there.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I remember my grandfather saying that he couldn't work alongside the Sheltons. So that's one of the reasons we spun out on our own. So here's a picture of grandfather Alfred Gaunt in the warehouse inspecting the cloth. His sons joined the business in the early 1960s, and the picture alongside shows grandfather in the middle with, an unidentified customer from the Far East, and my father Martin on the left-hand side and Uncle David on the right-hand side. They were very successful after the war and made considerable profits, continuing with the fine worsteds trade. And grandfather was quite an innovator and introduced the Dornier loom and package dyeing, all sorts of things that were risky at the time and have later been widely adopted by the industry. We were mainly exporting to big markets traditionally for us, was Japan, of course, being for the fine worsteds, but particularly the Edwin Woodhouse name is associated with the Middle East. In the 1970s, we developed a lightweight cloth with some shadow stripes, which proved very popular in the Middle East for a number of years, and developed a piece dyeing department, and we were able to weave long runs in the white and then dye them a multitude of colors for the Middle East, and we're very famous for our color range. So this is our agent in Qatar. We're in Doha here, opening a shop. Now, for Malcolm's benefit, he did request that we have a little chat about the paper press. So obviously, being fine worsted manufacturers, the handle of our cloth was very important to us, and our finishing department was second to none. Very traditional, I must say, and this is exemplified by looking here at the paper press. So the cloth here, it took 2 men to load this, several hours. And then it was left in the press overnight, gently warmed and under 2 tons of pressure, and unloaded the next morning. It took about an hour to unload, and then was often put back in for a double press finish a second time. Very expensive, but did produce an absolutely superlative finish. Sadly, when we demolished the mill building, the paper press was in the way, so that's gone. But we have recorded it in a proper archaeological report. So
What William doesn't realise is if he'd phoned me, I'd have given him £100,000 for that machine.
well, it's
The paper press is one of the highlights of my career. Seeing cloth, feeling cloth of the finest micron, woven to the finest standard, given a Bailey blow and a nice finish, then put through the paper press is exquisite. Unfortunately, if you haven't seen it, you never will again, because I don't think there'll be a paper press in the world anymore, William, will there?
I very much doubt it. I
Gone
very much doubt
with
it.
all the wooden finishing machines and all the wooden mailboxes.
Yeah.
The beautiful paper press is gone.
So yes, we're coming on to when we ceased manufacturing, which was in 2008, and the paper press dated from 1913. So we nearly ran it for 100 years, but not quite. But it was 2 stories high and also went 3 meters down into the ground. So the Gulf War of 1990 was a crucial time for us. It happened just as we're about to ship all our winter goods out there in early July, and the Gulf was our biggest market. And I think, when we look with hindsight, was probably the beginning of the demise of Edwin Woodhouse as a successful and continuously profitable company. So those of you who perhaps don't know where the Gulf War was when Iraq invaded Kuwait, and our major markets in the Middle East were Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, with satellite markets of Bahrain and the UAE, a bit to Oman and a bit to Yemen, but really it struck right at the heartland of our markets in the Middle East. And previously we had been selling to the Iranian market. They had the revolution in 1979, and then to Iraq. But we're finally circling in on our final markets here of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Here's my cousin John as a younger lad. I think he's in the finishing department there, labeling up a piece, and a bit more of the Middle East story. We did pick ourselves up after the Gulf War of 1990, and the Middle East market did return, but it was never quite the same. I think the combination of war and the introduction of shopping malls and a lot more sophisticated retail market in the Gulf states meant life was never the same. Hang on, I thought I had a picture of China. We did explore a lot of export markets. I think we've just done a recent thing. The Heritage Open Day was all about travel, and the team went through our passports and whatnot and found 120 countries that we visited selling cloth. So we really did scour the world trying to find markets. And we did have high hopes that China would be a successful market for us, but it really didn't fill the gap that the Middle East had. So I think by the time that we ceased manufacturing, we were roughly selling a third to Italy, to the tailoring market there, a third to the Middle East, and then a substantial portion to Japan and the UK, and a smattering to other countries abroad. The problem that John and I faced is that we'd been handed over a very successful company, but we weren't turning over enough. So we tried to grow sales, but to cut a long story short, in 2008, we decided to back out of the textile industry, and we sold the Woodhouse brand to a fellow mill in the Bradford region. And here's the production team. Sarah Osgoby, Steve Hamer, Jeff Bealby, and John Southern, I think, standing over the last piece of cloth woven at Sunnybank. And it's fitting, it was a piece of peace dye for the Middle East. So in 2008, we sold the textile business. The manufacturing plant was broken up. The best bits were sold on to colleagues in Bradford, and the sales team and the IP went across to a competitor.
Is
Um,
the Edwin Woodhouse brand still in existence, William? Does somebody still use it?
yes, yes, it's interesting. Since we sold the business, it's been sold three more times, and
Oh,
it's owned by the Chinese conglomerate. Is it Rui? They called?
Shandong Rui.
Yeah, yeah,
Can you
I
believe
believe.
that they tried to buy their way into the Harris tweed industry?
Yeah,
Shandong Rui, they're the biggest in China. Yeah, that's
um,
interesting.
I think that's correct. But I must say, I've ceased following what's happened to it. So the reason we sold the business is it ceased to be profitable, and as guardians of the family wealth, we decided that we'd concentrate on the only asset that we had left, which were the mill buildings. Um, Now, you may recall I said it was a profitable business for us in after the war. My grandfather had seen his father overexpand in the textile business by buying lots of other mills. So he decided just to stick with the one mill at Farsley, Sunnybank. He had one of these maxims: make sure you run the mill and it doesn't run you, was one of his maxims. He had many such quirky maxims. But when he made profits, he invested them in a portfolio of retail shops up and down the country. And without that foresight and an exit strategy that my grandfather developed, we wouldn't have been able to do what we've done with the mills. They provided a steady stream of income to allow us to redevelop the mills. The other thing that we had to do to redevelopment was build a team around us. John and I hadn't a clue about property development, and it took us a couple of years to sell down the business and build the team. So we and they've been crucial to our success. So that the KPP Architects, and there's John and I in the middle. Mike Haig from Dove Haig Phillips Surveyors, who are well known in the Huddersfield area. A lot of the mill families use them, and there's Kieran Wilkinson, who's now with Bradford as our lawyer. And yeah, they always say surround yourself with people that are better than you, and that be very summed up by that picture there. So John and I worked out a what we wanted to do was to um, invest in Sunnybank Mills and improve the family asset. And so we developed a vision, and it was very simple. It was based on three things. One, that we wanted it to always be a place of employment, not a load of apartments. Secondly, we wanted to preserve as much of the heritage of the mill as possible, and we also wanted to re-engage with the community that we used to employ. And those three principles have held us very well over the years. And we developed a master plan for the mills, which we took us about 2 years and a lot of money, with Leeds City Council and the community chipping in. But that's been very useful. It's given us a pathway forward. And here we are having public consultations and winning over the trust of the public in 2012, 4 years afterwards, that we're manufacturing. And we went around the whole of north of England looking at other exemplary mill developments that have been carried out throughout the UK, such as Salts and Dean Clough. And people were very generous with their time. So we developed this master plan in April 2015. So that's coming up for 10 years ago now, which was essentially three things: was to change from being a textile mill to being a multi-use site, to demolish the weaving sheds in the middle of the site, which is, I'll just get a pointer here. So yeah, we demolished some buildings right in the center of the site here, and also to stick in some new development, should we wish, to the same scale as that which we demolished. And in 2010, while we're developing the master plan, we started development of the site. So as you can see here, it was quite a derelict set of buildings, or looked quite derelict, but essentially the structure was very sound. And there's a picture of it just taken earlier this week with one of our cafes. And a few more and after shots here. It's amazing how the mills can be transformed um, given a bit of investment and knowledge. Uh, Demolishing the center of the site was absolutely key to what we did, and it's opened up the middle of the site. So here's John and I in the middle of COVID, which wasn't very helpful, making a big muddy hole in the middle of the site. But as we finished that demolition off, and after COVID, the whole of the center of the site has opened up, and it's absolutely transformed what we've been able to do. And here are some of the tenants that we have on site now. We've got about 100 odd tenants. Sunnybank Mills is the largest creative hub in Leeds. We always say that creativity is in the DNA of the mill. You know, we produce collections for the fashion brands when we're a mill, and we seem to attract creative people. Emmerdale and Heartbeat were both filmed at the mill for 10 years each. And we still have, filming taking place at the mill as well. But here are some of the public-facing tenants. When we first started developing the mills, no one had ever heard of Sunnybank Mills because we were exporting, and we realised that we had to try and market the mill. So my mum's a visual artist. And I thought it'd be a great place to represent local artists where they could sell art. And so the visual art has become an important part of what we do now. Visual art's actually struggling in Leeds at the moment. It's a bit frustrating. So we are now probably, more important than I'd like to be in representing visual arts in Leeds. And here's Anna, our current arts director. And we have a gallery of rotating exhibitions on here. The heritage of the mill is very important to us, and we've got the archive, the museum and archive, with well over 100 years of designs there. Every single design that from Edwin Woodhouse's time onwards that we ever made at Sunnybank Mills is up in the archive. And here's our Heritage Director Rachel. We did a collaboration with Leeds City Station and wrapped their columns with designs inspired by the archive at Sunnybank Mills. We're just about to get the charitable status for the archive, and then we're going to go for museum accreditation. So that's developing nicely. And here is all the archive. It's in 6,000 square feet of space. And I think there are 60,000 designs in there covering the history of menswear. Alongside the visual arts, we also have performing arts at the mill. And here's the Trouble at Mill team. I always say one of the mill's successes is that it's tapped into the local talent. Never underestimate your community. These three gents lived locally and wanted to have a go in the entertainment business. And we gave them space free of charge for about 7 or 8 years, just to develop their audience and learn the craft. And we demolished the space that they were using, but that, they'd grown to such a size that we created an event space for them. And they are now one of our biggest tenants. So, it always pays to invest in people, I feel. And here we are celebrating the opening of the new event space, probably in about 2021. And the community is a really important thing for us. And so now we've opened out the centre of the mill with the demolition. And here's a lovely shot of the Queen's Jubilee weekend a couple of years ago, with the whole village enjoying the mills in a completely different way from that which they're engaged in it before, when their ancestors would have been workers there. We now support about 400 plus jobs at the mill in much better working conditions than the mill workers. And it's a real thriving community. All the tenants collaborate with each other, and we've got breweries, distillery, cafe, and whatnot. It really has been a great success and very gratifying. Um, and sorry, I should have included a picture of the hand looms. One of the things that I'm very keen is that we carry on the weaving tradition at Sunnybank Mills, and I came across the old hand looms that I learnt to weave on at the University of Leeds, and my father and uncle did too. And I've restored a number of those hand looms, and we teach people how to hand loom weave on those with an excellent weaving practitioner. Sorry, I have no patience to teach people, but Annie Smallwood is excellent at it. So we teach hand loom weaving. We've just got hold of a jacquard hand loom. So in the new year, I'm hoping to erect that and restore that jacquard loom, which has been very kindly donated to us. So we can offer jacquard hand loom weaving. And I very much hope that Sunnybank Mills becomes a hand loom weaving centre of excellence. And, you know, the craft of weaving is nurtured here at Sunnybank. So that's a very quick whisk through the history of the mill and a story of a family that's been connected with textiles for generations. So thank you very much. I think, are we handing over to questions now,
William,
Malcolm?
if you could go back to the previous slide.
Yeah,
One of the things that I liked about that is how you've retained the mill end wall, you know, where the weaving sheds used to be.
yeah.
That's a nice artistic touch. That while the sheds have gone, the slanted roofs that
So
held them
up here,
yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. The other
yeah.
thing, did you know that Farsley had a huge handloom weaving community in the 19th century? Over 1,000 handloom weavers were based in Farsley.
Well, there's a fact I didn't know. Thank you.
The same in Glasgow. Handloom weaving, while handloom weaving now is on the Isle of Lewis with the Harris Tweed, Glasgow had 4,000 handloom weavers. Edinburgh had 2,500.
Mhm.
Leeds had about 3,000. Handloom weaving in its day was the start of the whole industrial revolution and weaving. Quite incredible, isn't it?
Yeah,
And I,
yeah.
I think your idea, I mean, I've just found your talk fascinating, William. You must be so proud of your ancestors. I mean, my mother was a mender, so when you came across the menders, that's how I got into textiles because my mum was a mender. My cousin researched, and my great grandmother was a jute weaver in Dundee. For you to look back your history, it's just quite incredible. And your stories about Reuben Gaunt, I remember buying cloth from Reuben Gaunt, and it was Nick Gaunt that sold it, you know. And all put together all these little things in the history of textiles, and it's quite fascinating. The one I loved, which is quite synchronistic, last night I mentioned earlier that I was at the mill in Shipley, Salts Mill, for the campaign for Wool Week or Wool Month. And I was talking to Tom Hainsworth for about 20 minutes. And you mentioned Hainsworth, how one of your ancestors married the mill owner's daughter. And there's Tom, retired now from the business, and left it to his legacy. I thought your talk was fantastic, William. You must be really proud, as I say, and what you're doing, what you and John are doing just now is outstanding. For all you people listening, if you've never visited Sunnybank Mills, make it a point to go and to see what William and his cousin John have done. It's amazing. You can go for the day when there's an exhibition on, you can see the exhibition, you can see the craft centre, there's restaurants, there's the bars, as William said. One of the things I once did, I was over with Susan looking at your archives, William, and I saw a pattern from Jaeger. And I took it, I think it was about 1963, and I took it to Jaeger and we brought it back to life. We made the cloth again from 1963 and Jaeger bought it. Unfortunately, Jaeger have now gone as well. And that's one of the saddest things. Dr. Jaeger was one of the passionate men as far as wool and wool textiles was concerned. So for all you for all you guests to the lecture this evening, a lot of you will know the history. For you younger people, what you've heard tonight is how the industry is changing. And I think it's a joy to hear you say, William, that you're going to bring handloom weaving back. I truly believe that's the way that we'll start to bring the craft and the art and the craft and the skill of textiles back again. Bring it all back. It was 1845 that the Harris Tweed industry started. It was 1893 that the Bradford Textile Society started. Make it your centenary that you've got a weaving shed of handloom weaving. With state warping, you know, all the crafts, all the skills, it would be fantastic. Do we have any questions? I've got one question here from Jean G. Jean has asked, William, did Edwin Woodhouse have any connection to the Garnets of Appleby Bridge?
To the Garnets, definitely friends. And you know, when you look at the family, the tree, you know, you can see us marrying the Ambler family, who are famous spinners over at, was it Ardsley that Thomas Ambler's was? And yeah, I mean the textile families, as you know, all socialized together. Yeah, there were a lot of connections. Yeah. And our family actually lived in Appley Bridge, just opposite the Garnet Mill there. So yeah, they're definitely, yeah. And yeah, my father's great friends with John Garnet.
Okay. If there's any more questions, if you could put your questions on the Q&A section. I've got a note here from Sharon Turner. It's not a question, she says, but just to say how much she loves visiting Sunnybank Mills. The whole complex has a wonderful vibe. I'm a textile student and love the exhibitions. However, I wish I lived nearer to go to the evening social events. I think that's a nice endorsement, Sharon. I've been to a couple of the events and they're very, very well attended. And as I say, when William offered us the facilities for the Bradford Textile Society Phoenix project, we were then showing the youngsters, the students and the apprentices, the history of textiles. And it's very, very important. It's one of the reasons that William does what he does and why I do what I do, is to encourage the youngsters to become part of our textile future, not just our heritage. My comment is that the 4-year-olds today are the students in 10 years' time, the apprentices in 15 years' time, and the young managers in 20 years' time. As I said at the start of the lecture, in 2093, when the Bradford Textile Society is 200 years old, the 3-year-old today will be 72 when they attend the bicentennial. It's very important that we encourage children to become involved in our business. Karen Charlton has, with regard to the re-establishment of handloom weavers, are there any plans to use yarn from hand spinners, also sheep breeds in Britain? That's a good question, Karen.
Well, Karen, I have behind me here some Herdwick wool, which is from my own sheep. So yes, very much so. I'm hoping to weave some of our own wool, and we do have people who do their own spinning, and they'll bring their yarn to the handlooms at the mill, and either just throw it across the weft to get some color and weave effects, or use it more intentionally. So yeah, very much so. And you know, I'm really keen that the handloom weaving develops. We have taster days, so people can just have a go, and we get much more in depth and teach people how to warp and draw in their own designs, and really get connected with the fantastic, you know, skill of handloom weaving.
I've got a note here from Linda. Linda from the Society of Dyers and Colourists has said, passion for people, as you say, is key to our progression, and your family may have given you a good start, but continuity for the future is your passion for investing in people in the community. It's lovely to see. Thanks, Linda Hodgson, SDC and Sharps Fabric Printers. Well done, Linda. And
thanks for the shout out, Linda.
Sharon Turner has just told me her age, and I will very courteously not repeat it, but you are still young. You are still a young student. You're talking to the old men of the textile industry here.
We're young at heart.
Absolutely. Somebody asked me how old I was, and I told them I was 36 with an extra 35 years experience. William, that was fantastic. I'd like to, on behalf of all the guests that have listened to you this evening, thank you very, very much. That was fantastic. Our next talk, everyone, will be on the 28th of February, and it's Susan K. Williams from the president of the Society of Dyers and Colourists and the Royal School of Needlework. Susan's talk is outstanding. If you want to hear about the history of colour in the 18th century and the influence that colour and textiles had in our lives, please tune in on the 28th of November at 7:30 and listen to Susan. I'd also like to ask you to consider membership. Yesterday, when I was at the British Wool offices and at Salts Mill, we encouraged 8 other members to enrol in the Bradford Textile Society. If you are a member, fantastic. If you're not a member, could you please consider membership? Individual membership is £25. Corporate membership for companies is £50, and Phoenix membership for the young members is £5, and that encourages you to attend all our lectures. I'm hoping last night when I was at this event, the young team from Hainsworth were there. We can't see names of who the guests are, but if you're here, thanks for coming and good luck, because you've had Hainsworth plugged quite a few times this evening. So the key thing is to keep coming to these lectures. We're putting a lot of work into to make them interesting for you. There's some fantastic lectures that you'll see on our website. If you can encourage new members, Tammy, our secretary, will send you a membership application form, and keep supporting the Bradford Textile Society. We've organised a dinner for next year, so put it in your diary, the 21st of November 2025, and we'll all have a celebration and see how much textiles has improved since October 2024 in the next 12 months. Thank you all very much for attending, and I see there's another couple of questions, and we've got a few minutes, so I'll go back and see if I can find them. Caroline Hudson, nice to see you, Caroline. Thank you for a fascinating talk, William. It's concerning that there is a decline in handloom weaving being taught and made accessible to the next generation. Have you considered renting out loom space to young weavers?
Oh yes, Caroline. We do have looms for hire. In fact, we've got 2. They're narrow width Dobby looms, and you can either hire them by the hour, by the day, or for more extended periods of time if you've got a project. So absolutely, and we want to try and cross. There are a lot of people that perhaps have learnt to weave at college and are accomplished handloom weavers, but don't have access to a loom. And so, yeah, we want to be able to provide those. So absolutely.
One of the things, William, I never knew you were going to mention handlooms tonight, but can you believe that yesterday I was on the phone to Dave Watson of Griffith Rapier Looms up in Washington Town and Weir, and Dave makes the handlooms for various industries. So it may be worthwhile you and I having a chat, because it's something that I'm looking at just now as well, is how to resurrect the handloom industry, not on the old looms, but on some of the more modern looms. Deborah has asked, could you say something about the economic effect of the current success? How well are you doing, I presume, Deborah's asking.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, we are very, very pleased with how Sunnybank Mills has developed and really has a life of its own. I'm not going to pretend it's easy. It's been a real slog, and real estate takes a lot of cash to invest in. We're only a small family business, and we are taking it one step at a time at the mills. We've invested over £10 million in the mills, and it probably needs at least that again to finish the job off, maybe near another £20 million. So it's going to take a long time. And just, running a mill building is a complex, set of things. And, it costs a lot of money with all the upkeep. But yeah, I'm pleased to say that, it's been a great success. But, I don't measure our success just in terms of financial value. I'm really keen on the social impact that we make and the social value that Sunnybank brings to Leeds and the local community.
Excellent. Well done, William. So work. Finally, Karen Charlton has said, they're smallholders in Northumberland selling their rare breed sheep fleece to Japanese companies. They would much rather sell to British companies, hand spinners and weavers. Let's hope your hand weaving initiative is a seed for growth and more heritage skills. One of the things, Karen, that we've been successful in doing is we've got, and hopefully there's some members listening this evening, from the Valley Blacknose Sheep Society, who have joined the Bradford Textile Society. And we've got another Sheep Society joined, because what we tried to do was open up the membership to other people. And the Valley Black Nose have already sent their fleeces up to British Wool to have them evaluated. So I think as a cooperative and with network and just learning what we've all learnt this evening, I think this is the start of things starting to change within the textile industry. It may not be massive, it may not be great, but at the start of everything, it never was. And William, I would like to thank you very much for the effort you put into doing that. I would like to thank your family and your ancestors very much for all the work they did in allowing you to present this lecture. And on behalf of everyone that's listening, thank you very, very much. For all you guests that joined us this evening, thank you for coming. I look forward to seeing you again on the 28th of November. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.